in his day, he'd been the best pickpocket this side of the Thames. Time and too much gin had dulled his reflexes, but his fingers were still nimble. "Don't fancy what you take, Yeti. You taught me that." Juliet's neck abruptly swiveled when she heard the distinctive click of a stone being turned over. Frowning, she stared intently into the inky darkness, her hand inching down towards the knife she always carried on her waist. There was a pistol on her opposite hip, a dagger strapped to the inside of her thigh, and just for good measure, a tiny pair of sewing shears tied to her wrist. She'd never killed a man, but she'd spilled blood, plenty of it, and for the past 2 nights she had been plagued by the uneasy feeling of being watched. But just as her hand began to curl around the smooth handle of her knife, a yellow tabby darted across the alley and disappeared into a pile of wooden crates. Exhaling slowly, she turned her attention back to Yeti, who lifted a scruffy white brow.
"Trouble?"
he asked, scratching underneath his chin. "Nothing I cannot handle."
"You could always quit, you know. Hang it up and walk away for good. I know you have enough blunt."
"No one ever has enough blunt." Leaning forward, she pressed her lips to his rough cheek. The grizzled old man was as close as she'd ever come to having a grandfather, or a father, for that matter. "You taught me that as well. Sleep tight, Yeti."
"Aye."
He patted his coat pocket.
"With this pretty under my pillow, I'll do just that. Watch yourself, Jules."
A line of irritation creased his weathered brow.
"The runners are getting closer. Hans said he saw one of the bastards all the way down on Finlay Street. It's that damn Spencer. Never thought he'd be the one to go turncoat on us."
"Would you rather he have ended up in Newgate, or worse?" Not too long ago, Felix Spencer had been the greatest thief in all of London. There wasn't a painting he couldn't pinch, a necklace he couldn't swipe. He'd been the best, until he'd been caught. But instead of stretching him up by his neck or throwing him in prison, the new captain of the runners had given him a choice. Spend the rest of his life rotting away in a cell, or put his considerable talents to good use on Bow Street. Felix had been a runner for nearly 2 years now, but it still gave her a jolt every time she saw him walking down the street in broad daylight. She could only imagine what it was like for Yeti. She knew the old man felt betrayed, especially since he'd been the one to teach Felix everything he knew. But what had he expected? She knew if she'd been in Felix's shoes, she would have made the same decision. Anything to avoid the hell on earth that was Newgate Prison. "He's not giving them names." She squeezed Yeti's hand. "If he were, we'd both be locked up already."
"Aye,"
Yeti grumbled after a pause.
"I suppose you're right about that. Still,
"I know. It does not sit well with me either. One of our own, working for them." The corners of her mouth tightened. "I'd be happy if I never saw another runner for as long as I lived. Cock-sucking bastards." Turning her head, she spat on the ground in disgust, and Yeti chuckled.
"Easy, lass. Don't go losing that Irish temper of yours over something you can't control."
"For the 100th time, I'm not bloody Irish." And it annoyed her to no end every time he said otherwise. The truth of the matter was that she had no idea where or who she'd come from. Her parents very well could have been from Ireland. She had no way of knowing. They'd both perished in a fire when she was no more than a babe. To this day, she did not even know their names.
"You've the hair of one, don't you? Redder than the rubies you just pinched. Never seen the likes of it in my whole life. Fine ladies would pay a pretty penny to have that colour, as would fine men,"
Yeti said meaningfully. She took a step back and folded her arms. "I'm a thief, not a whore."
"And I never said you were, did I?
"But you could be a rich man's mistress."
You're the look of one. Clean the soot off of ye face and trade those pants you insist on wearing for a fancy dress, and ye would blend right in with all the pretty ladies in Hyde Park.